The first warning came as a whisper across the void, an urgent broadcast that every human ship received at the exact same moment. No threats, no accusations, just a single, chilling verdict. Humanity was banished from the known galaxy. Overnight, the Galactic Council, the same council humans had helped build, defend, and fund, declared us too unpredictable, too ambitious, too dangerously human to remain among the stars. And so our fleets were pushed past the rim and ordered never to return. At first, the galaxy felt relieved. Without humans, disputes quieted, borders froze, and old rivalries paused. But as decades passed, something strange began to happen. Worlds once thriving began to stall. Trade routes withered, innovation slowed. Even the council itself grew quieter, colder, less alive. It turned out no other species pushed the impossible like humans did. No one else challenged fate so fiercely. No one else threw themselves into danger simply because someone had to. And far beyond the rim, humanity rebuilt, not in anger but in determination. Without the noise of the galaxy, we found a new kind of unity. Colonies that once argued learned to cooperate. Scientists who had been ignored or overshadowed found room to imagine again. Humanity didn't fade in exile. We sharpened, we grew wiser, stronger, more patient. But the galaxy didn't stay quiet. Whispers started spreading across old council channels, rumors of a new threat. Something vast and ancient that had begun consuming systems at the edge. Entire planets vanished without distress signals. Fleets disappeared. And slowly, fear settled into every council chamber. They tried everything: alliances, negotiations, technologies pieced together from a dozen worlds. None of it worked. And one truth became impossible to deny: there had always been one species that stood up first. One that refused to bend even when the darkness grew teeth. One that ran toward danger when everyone else wanted to run away. The same species they had cast out. That's when an unexpected message reached Earth's outer colonies. Carried by a trembling diplomatic ship patched with outdated council insignia. A plea disguised as a formal request. A call for help wrapped in diplomatic caution. They didn't want to admit it openly, but the meaning was unmistakable. The galaxy wanted humanity back. Yet humans remembered the exile, the silence, the sudden betrayal. And now, standing at the edge of a crisis not of our making, we face a question heavier than any starship hull. Do we return to save those who abandoned us? Or do we stay in the quiet corner of space where we finally learn to breathe freely? Our leaders debate behind sealed doors. Our fleets wait in silent formation. And across every colony, from the smallest outpost to the largest city dome, people feel the tension rising like gravity before a storm. Because if we return, it won't just be as exiles seeking forgiveness. It will be as the one force the galaxy hoped never to need again. And right now, no one knows what humanity will choose next. In the days after the Council's plea reached the colonies, a strange mix of pride and uncertainty spread through humanity's scattered worlds. People gathered around public screens, watching the transmission replay over and over. The Council representative spoke in a steady voice, but the tremor beneath it was impossible to hide. It was the kind of fear that didn't come from politics or trade disputes. It came from something far deeper, something that threatened the core of every civilization in the galaxy. Most humans had grown up hearing stories about life before the exile. Stories of bustling stations, shared research, and cooperative fleets. But they also remembered the sudden shift, how quickly humanity went from being valued members of the Council to being treated as a threat. The reasons given back then were vague. Words like instability, unpredictability, and excessive intervention were repeated until they lost meaning. But the real reason, whispered in private circles, was simpler. Humans changed things. Humans pushed boundaries. Humans solved problems no one else wanted to face. Some species admired that spirit, others feared it. And fear often wins in politics. During our years beyond the rim, that same human push had shaped the colonies into something the Council had never expected. The frontier forced cooperation between groups that once disagreed on everything. People learned to adapt to harsh worlds, unstable climates, and thin resources. Entire generations grew up knowing they might never see the planets that had once been the heart of human culture. But instead of fading, humanity became something sharper focused, inventive, unbroken. Still, the message from the Council stirred old wounds. Some felt anger return like a long-forgotten echo. Others felt tempted by the thought of rejoining the galaxy they had once called home. And then there were those who sensed opportunity, a chance to rewrite humanity's place in the stars on our own terms. But the biggest question remained: what exactly was the threat spreading across Council space? Rumors leaked through old channels, fragments of audio, half-corrupted logs, intercepted distress calls. None of them were clear. Some described a shadow that moved between systems faster than any known ship. Others spoke of entire fleets shutting down without warning, as if something had drained every spark of power. A few messages mentioned strange signals, repeating patterns no one could decode. Whatever it wasn't simply an enemy. It was something unknown, something that didn't fit into any category the Council had studied before. Human researchers tried to assemble the clues. Engineers compared reports with old data from deep space phenomena. Strategists examined star maps and calculated trajectories. But even with all our progress, one fact remained: the threat was moving, and it was moving toward the rim. Some believed the Council had waited too long to reach out. Others believed they knew more than they were admitting. And somewhere out there, in the empty stretch of space between their territory and ours, the unknown danger continued to grow. Now humanity stands on the edge of a decision that could shape the future of the galaxy. But while leaders argue and fleets prepare, there's a quiet sense that something else is watching, something listening to every move we make. And soon, whether we return or stay hidden, that something will find us. In the weeks that followed, the Council's message continued to echo through every human settlement, but the real discussions happened far from public screens. Small groups gathered in old cargo bays, quiet cafes, maintenance tunnels, anywhere they could speak freely without being overheard. People wanted answers, and no one trusted that the Council had given the full truth. Even the tone of their pleas suggested there was more hiding beneath the surface, something heavy enough to shake the same governance that once acted untouchable. Across the colonies, a few key figures began to emerge. Not official leaders, but people the communities naturally looked to. One was a former fleet coordinator who had lived through the exile and carried the memory of those final days with a weight that never lifted. Another was a younger voice, someone who had grown up beyond the rim and knew nothing of the old alliances, only the resilience that came from surviving on harsh worlds. There were scientists who had seen unexplained signals long before the Council said anything, and engineers who had been quietly preparing for a threat they couldn't yet describe. These people had no interest in power. They wanted clarity, safety, and a chance to choose humanity's path without being manipulated. Meanwhile, the fragments of distress calls continued to roll in, each one more unsettling than the last. One transmission showed a starship drifting, its lights flickering like a dying fire. The crew sounded calm at first, reporting a strange interference that blocked navigation systems. Then their voices changed, hesitation, confusion, and finally the recording cut to static. Another message came from a mining station on the edge of Council territory. The workers described a dim glow spreading across the sky, followed by complete silence from their equipment. Their final words were quiet, almost whispered, as though they feared something was listening. Human analysts pieced together every scrap they could find. They noticed patterns the Council had overlooked or ignored. The reports all originated from regions rich in ancient ruins, remnants of civilizations far older than any modern species, places long considered dead, sealed, or unexplorable. This raised a disturbing possibility. Whatever force was moving through the galaxy might not be new at all. It might be something awakened. Despite the rising danger, humanity did not rush to respond. Too many remembered the long years of exile and the cold way the Council had pushed them aside. Trust could not be rebuilt in a single message, even one filled with fear. Some argued that returning to help would only lead to another betrayal once the crisis ended. Others believed humanity had a responsibility to the galaxy, no matter how it had treated us. There was no simple answer, only a growing sense that time was slipping away. Yet beneath all the debate, there was an unspoken realization shared across every colony. Whatever was coming was not going to stop at the old border. Sooner or later, it would reach us too. And somewhere in the dark between the stars, the threat continued to spread subtly, unseen, and getting closer with every passing day. Across the colonies, the debate over whether humanity should return to the galaxy deepened into something far more personal. Families were divided, crews argued during long shifts, and old friendships stretched under the weight of uncertainty. People who had once agreed on everything suddenly found themselves on opposite sides, each convinced the other was risking their future. The tension didn't erupt into chaos, but it simmered quietly, shaping every conversation and every decision. One group believed the Council's plea hid a dangerous truth. They suspected the Council had known about this growing threat long before reaching out. Maybe they had tried to contain it and failed. Or maybe they had accidentally awakened something while exploring the ancient ruins scattered across their territories. If that was the case, then asking humanity for help was not just a request, it was a warning that the galaxy was already losing the fight. Another group argued from a different angle. They remembered how humanity had always thrived under pressure, how we turned challenges into breakthroughs. They believed the colonies needed to show the galaxy what humans had become during exile, not with anger but with strength and unity. These people weren't eager for war or recognition, they simply feared what might happen if humanity stayed isolated while the galaxy collapsed around them. But the most complicated perspective came from those who didn't trust either side. They questioned whether humanity was ready to return, not because of the Council, but because of what exile had created. The colonies had grown independent, adaptable, tightly woven. Returning to the galaxy might mean losing that unity. It might mean old politics creeping back in. And if the unknown threat was truly as dangerous as it appeared, being tied to the Council again could drag humanity into a conflict we weren't prepared to survive. While these tensions grew, new reports arrived from deep space scouts, this time from human ships patrolling regions near the rim. They detected faint energy traces drifting through empty space, the same signature found in the Council distress calls. The traces didn't behave like ship engines or weapons. They moved almost organically, spreading in slow arcs that didn't match any known pattern. When the scouts tried to follow them, the signals vanished, as if whatever caused them simply slipped out of reach. Scientists studying the data noticed something unnerving. The faint patterns resembled old recordings from humanity's earliest exploration signals discovered near derelict alien relics long before the Council existed. Those signals had been dismissed as artifacts of malfunctioning equipment. Now, they looked like the first whisper of the same threat that was consuming systems today. Within the colonies, a small team of researchers pushed to investigate these ruins themselves. They believed the answers were hidden in places the Council had tried to keep locked away for centuries. But sending a team meant making a choice to act without waiting for approval or negotiation. Some saw this as necessary, others saw it as reckless, the kind of move that had fueled the Council's fear of humanity in the first place. Meanwhile, the Council's silence grew louder. No updates, no follow-ups, no explanations. It was as if they were waiting to see whether humanity would act on its own, and out beyond even the scout ships. Near the cold edge where human space faded into darkness, sensors picked up something new, something large, slow, and steadily advancing toward the rim. Whatever it was, it hadn't revealed itself yet, but it was coming, and it wasn't alone. The first clear sign that the threat had finally reached human space came as a faint tremor on long-range sensors. No shape, no signature, just a ripple in the dark that shouldn't have existed. At first, analysts dismissed it as a glitch caused by drifting debris or interference from a nearby pulsar, but minutes later another ripple appeared, then another. They moved in a slow pattern, almost like deliberate steps taken by something just outside the edge of detection. Word spread fast. Colonists gathered in control rooms, staring at the screens as if willing the readings to make sense. Fleet officers whispered to one another, trying to estimate how much time remained before the unknown force crossed fully into human territory. No one had an exact answer, but everyone felt the same quiet truth settling into their bones. Whatever was approaching was now close enough to touch. The research team preparing to explore the forbidden ruins worked faster, knowing their window was shrinking. They had collected fragments of old maps, recovered logs from ancient probes, and even rebuilt devices pulled from long-abandoned Council storage vaults. Each piece pointed to one thing: the threat wasn't random. It was following the same path marked by relics scattered throughout the galaxy, remnants of a civilization so old its history had dissolved into myth. The Council had avoided those ruins out of fear. Humanity had avoided them out of caution. But something else had not avoided them at all. It had been awakened by them. As the team prepared for launch, the colonies around them felt the rising tension like a storm pressing down. Some believed the research mission was the only hope of understanding the enemy. Others feared it would draw the threat directly toward them. But before arguments could erupt again, the long-range station at the rim transmitted a message that froze every conversation. They had visual contact. The transmission was grainy, the camera struggling to focus on a shape that didn't behave like a ship. It looked more like a drifting shadow, bending light around itself, its outline shifting like smoke trapped behind glass. It wasn't attacking, but the way it moved, slow, patient, confident, made the station crew's voices tighten with fear. Then the signal cut out, leaving only static. Fleet commanders ordered defensive formations, but no one truly understood what they would be facing. Ships powered up their drives, forming a loose barrier near the rim. People watched from colony windows, their reflections faint in the glass as the stars seemed to flicker with unease. Even those who believed humanity should remain isolated now felt the instinctive pull to protect their home, no matter what came. Meanwhile, deep inside the Council's territory, new distress signals appeared across the shared channels, short bursts of audio filled with panic. Warnings shouted over failing systems, desperate calls for evacuation. Whatever was consuming their space was speeding up, and the closer it came, the more its presence disrupted communications, power grids, and navigation. The galaxy was unraveling faster than anyone had feared. The research team launched just as the next ripple struck the edge of human space. It wasn't an attack, it felt more like a pulse. A single wave of pressure that made every sensor in the colonies flicker at once. Lights dimmed, engines hummed unevenly. People felt a brief dizziness, as if gravity itself had shifted. And far out in the dark, the shadow moved again, closer now, clearer in shape, as if it wanted humanity to see it before the real confrontation began. Every colony fell into a tense silence. Every ship held its breath. Every person knew the moment they had tried to prepare for was finally arriving. But no one had any idea what would happen next. The moment the shadow edged closer, the colonies braced for an attack. But instead of striking, the drifting shape suddenly stopped. Every sensor froze on it, waiting. The fleets near the rim held position, their engines humming in a tight, nervous rhythm. Then, without warning, a new signal erupted across human space, loud, sharp, and unlike anything the analysts had ever recorded. It wasn't a distress call. It wasn't a weapon. It was a message. At first, no one could translate it. The sound was layered, shifting between tones that felt almost alive. Some believed it was an attempt at communication. Others argued it was a warning. But there was something even stranger buried in the signal, something that sent an uneasy chill through the analysts when they finally isolated it. Hidden beneath the layers was a pattern, not random, not alien, human. It was faint, distorted, but unmistakably a faint echo of an old human emergency code, a style used centuries before the Council era that shouldn't have been possible. The colonies had never encountered anything that could mimic human signals, especially not technology this ancient and advanced. Fleet Command demanded a full breakdown, but the more the analysts studied it, the more frightening it became. The message contained fragments of coordinates that matched the forbidden ruins the research team was heading toward. Something out there knew where humanity was going. While everyone tried to understand the signal, the research team approached the ancient site. The ruins were unlike anything they expected, massive structures floating in the void, arranged in a pattern that looked more like a system of locks than buildings. As the ship drew closer, their instruments picked up faint energy signatures inside the structures. It was as if they had been dormant for ages, waiting for someone or something to arrive. Then the second twist hit. The Council, silent for weeks, broadcast a sudden, urgent message to the colonies. Their voice was shaky, rushed, filled with fear they could no longer hide. They revealed that the threat was not moving randomly at all. It was following a path directly tied to humanity's ancient history, a history even humans had forgotten. According to the Council, the ruins scattered throughout the galaxy were not simply remnants of an extinct species. They were part of a containment system built long before humans even evolved. And the thing breaking through it had awakened because of humanity. Not intentionally, not through malice, but something humans had done during their early years among the stars. An exploration mission lost to time had been the first to disturb the ancient seals. The Council had discovered fragments of this truth during the years leading to the exile but chose not to share it. Fearing what humanity might do with the knowledge, the colonies erupted with disbelief and anger. Some accused the Council of lying to shift blame. Others felt the weight of a terrifying possibility. A mistake buried in forgotten history had unleashed something even the oldest civilizations had feared. But before anyone could unravel the truth, the research team sent a final transmission from the ruins. Their voices shook as they described something moving inside the structures, something waking up as the shadow in space drew closer. The last thing they said before the signal cut out was that the ruins weren't just ancient, they were responding. And whatever they were responding to was coming fast. When the research team's signal collapsed into silence, every colony felt the same drop in their stomachs. The fleets near the rim tightened formation, ready for whatever came through the dark next. The drifting shadow had resumed moving, its shape shifting with a slow, deliberate certainty. It wasn't hiding anymore. It wanted to be seen. And just when the tension reached breaking point, the ancient ruins near the research team burst to life. Across human space, sensors lit up with a surge of energy strong enough to shake entire stations. Beams of pale light spiraled outward from the ruins, forming a lattice that stretched across the void like a web being pulled tight. The fleets at the rim watched the glow spread between distant stars, connecting points no map had ever linked. It wasn't random. It was a system awakening, a defense older than the Council, older than every known civilization. The shadow reacted instantly. It shifted, almost recoiling, and for the first time since appearing, it stopped moving forward. The ruins were responding to it just as the research team had warned, but the glow from the ruins wasn't stable. It flickered, pulsed, then dimmed again, as though struggling to power itself after so many silent centuries. The colonies received a burst of data from the ruins before the final collapse of the research team's link. It showed exactly what the structures needed, an external energy source strong enough to trigger the full activation of the ancient containment system. Human engineering teams scrambled to understand the data. The answer came from the younger scientists, those who had grown up on harsh frontier worlds with limited resources. They realized something the Council had never considered. Humanity's own ships, upgraded and refined over years of exile, carried engine cores more efficient than anything the ruins had been exposed to before. If they synchronized multiple ship cores and channeled them into the ancient system, they could reignite the entire network. It was dangerous. Overloading the cores could destroy half the fleet. But if they didn't try, the shadow would break through the half-awakened defenses and sweep across human space next. With no time to argue, the fleets moved into position. Lines of human ships formed around the glowing lattice, engines brightening until they burned white. Commanders gave the order, and every ship pushed its power into the ancient network. The ruins flared like a star being born. The lattice stretched across space, humming, vibrating, then solidifying into a barrier so bright it lit distant worlds. The shadow let out a sound, not a voice, but a pressure that rippled through the void. Then it struck. The impact echoed across every colony. Light clashed with darkness, the ancient system holding firm as the shadow writhed against it. For a moment, it seemed like the barrier might collapse. But the combined power of the human fleet surged again, stabilizing the lattice and forcing the shadow backward. Inch by inch, the ancient system pushed the entity into the void it had once been sealed away in. And then, just as the shadow was nearly gone, the unexpected twist hit. A second figure appeared, smaller, sharper, moving with purpose. Unlike the shadow, this one didn't attack. It passed through the barrier untouched and drifted toward human space. Its form flickered, then shifted into something unmistakably familiar. A human silhouette. The fleets froze. The signal it emitted was clear, old, and undeniably real. It was a distress call from a human ship lost centuries before the Council even existed. The Exile had not been the beginning of humanity's story in the galaxy. It had been the middle, and someone out there, someone human, had known about the ancient threat long before anyone alive today was even born. The fleets held position as the silhouette drifted closer, illuminated by the fading glow of the ancient lattice. No one spoke at first. Even across secure channels, there was only stunned silence. The figure wasn't an illusion or a trick from the shadow. Its signal matched records so old they barely survived the exile. It came from a ship launched during humanity's first, clumsy steps into deep space era, when explorers traveled farther than their technology could guarantee safety. When the small craft finally stabilized near the rim, the fleet surrounded it with quiet caution. A boarding team approached and found something everyone thought impossible. Inside the vessel were cryopods, centuries old and failing, yet one still flickered with a faint heartbeat. The survivor inside was fragile, but alive. When the med team brought the pod on board, the readings confirmed the truth. This person had been part of the mission that first encountered the ancient ruins. Their final message, buried deep in corrupted logs, revealed everything the galaxy had forgotten. Long before the Council existed, early human explorers had stumbled upon the same lattice of ruins, unaware of what they were. Their presence reactivated a fragment of the system, just enough to weaken the prison holding the shadow at bay. The ancient civilization that built the network had fallen long before it could warn anyone. Humanity, without knowing it, had sparked the first tremor in a chain that eventually woke the threat. The Council had later found scattered evidence but kept it secret, terrified that humans already bold and unpredictable might try to fix a danger they didn't understand. As the survivor was taken to safety, the fleet stood watch over the resealed barrier. The shadow was gone, pushed back into the void where it had been trapped for thousands of years. The ruins dimmed again, sinking into silence, but this time with the knowledge that humanity understood their purpose. The network wasn't just a warning, it was a responsibility. Back in the colonies, the news spread quickly. There was shock, sorrow, and a quiet realization that the galaxy had been shaped by choices made long before any of them were born. But there was also a growing pride, not in power or conquest, but in the way humanity had faced the unknown together, even after exile. They had stood on their own for decades, and when the galaxy finally needed them again, they didn't turn away. The Council sent a final message as the dust began to settle. There was no demand, no negotiation, just gratitude and an offer to rebuild trust, slowly and honestly. Humanity didn't rush to accept. The scars of exile still lingered, but this time, the decision wasn't driven by fear or anger. People discussed it openly, knowing they now had something the galaxy hadn't seen before: choice, independence, and a deeper understanding of their place among the stars. In the end, the colonies decided to reconnect, not as outcasts seeking approval, but as equal partners. The fleets remained near the rim, not as guards, but as caretakers of the ancient barrier that now linked every species' future. As for the survivor from the lost mission, they became a living reminder of how human curiosity had once unlocked both danger and possibility. Their quiet presence seemed to symbolize something larger, that humanity had always been part of the galaxy's story, even when the galaxy forgot. And as the stars settled back into calm, humanity stepped forward again, not banished, not feared, but ready to face whatever waited next in the darkness, with the same spirit that had carried them through exile. A spirit the galaxy, at last, understood was irreplaceable.